Hi everyone, thank you for joining. We're going to get started in a minute, just waiting for a few more people to join. Sit tight, grab a cup of tea, and we'll see you shortly. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Getting Started with G Suite Distance Learning Edition. Today we are joined by a number of people. So just to introduce myself for those of you that don't know me, I'm Kiri and I'm the National Accounts Manager in the Google for Education team in the UK. We also are joined by Andrew Caffrey, who is a certified trainer and part of EdTech Team UK. And we have two people from Leo Academy Trust, Graham Macaulay and Cheryl Shirley, who are going to be talking to you about what they're doing with distance learning and G Suite. And we're also really lucky to have AET on the call. And from there, we have Darren and Francis. So today's webinar is going to cover off a few things, and I've seen in the chat that there are people from everywhere across the whole of the UK, which is wonderful to see. And hello from your home offices, whether that's a makeshift kitchen or trying to hide from kids and pets somewhere. This is really for people who are just looking to get started with G Suite and maybe haven't even seen the tools before. So those of you that we know particularly well, please feel free to add some of your great use cases and case stories in the chat to add some real rich value to the conversation that's happening. As we go through today, we'll also be answering questions, and as we end every person's slot, we will make sure that your questions get asked to the relevant people, and there'll be time at the end where we'll bring everyone back and answer some of your key questions, so keep them coming. So the agenda for today, I'm going to start off by telling you how you can actually get started with G Suite. So very basic step-by-step instructions of signing up, verifying your domain, etc. Then we're going to be moving on to Andy, who's going to give us some top tips for using G Suite for Education for distance learning. So this is really where we're going to take a deep dive into looking at how to use Meet and Classroom to really effectively keep your students learning whilst they're at home. Then we're going to hear from Leo Academy Trust and AET, who are going to be sharing best practices for keeping learning at home with students from primary and secondary schools. And then at the end, as I said, we'll have time for Q&A. So, as I said, thank you for joining the first of our distance learning webinar series. Some of you may have already seen this, but we're actually going to be running a series of these over the next coming weeks, just to try and help our teachers be supported during this time. We're aware that some people are at very different levels when it comes to using online tools and cloud platforms. So we wanted to make sure that we're creating something that's valuable and practical and easy steps for you to go away with. So today we're really just kind of base level getting started and hearing some great stories from schools. But moving on from this, we'll be looking at some really kind of tool specific stuff. So next week, we're going to be doing some webinars on Google Classroom and Hangouts Meet, and also Google Sites and Google Forms. So if you're interested to learn more, you can check out that link, and hopefully someone will be sharing the link in the stream as well. But you can go there and register your interest, and we'll send you out the link to the webinars as they come up. Secondly, we have a new resource and it's called Teach from Home. And this has actually been made specifically for teachers and includes some great top tips and some good links and useful links to tutorials on how to get started with things like Google Meet and Classroom and how to use Gmail. And that's all in this kind of one hub. And we will be adding more resources to this as time goes on. So please make sure you go and take a look. It kind of links out to all of our usual teaching resources like the Teacher Centre, which I'll talk about now. So as some of you may already be educators, I can see in the chat, you'll know that we have a place called the Teacher Centre, which is full of really useful resources for teachers to go and kind of do their own self-study. So we have things like first day trainings. So if you're completely brand new to things like Google Classroom, you can step into this. Within sort of 5-10 minutes, you'll be able to set up a classroom and create an assignment for students. So really quick and snappy learning and training sessions. We also have micro courses on the different tools. We have the certifications, and I know that Leo Academy Trust will probably talk a little bit more to that as we go through to them later on. But now might be a good time to ask your teachers to do some certifications if they're already using G Suite and are already really comfortable with the tools. And just as an FYI, we also have a Getting Started with G Suite email PD series. So as teachers sign up to this, they'll actually get over the next 8 weeks an email into their inbox that will give them a 15-minute, very quick, short and snappy kind of getting started training session that allows them to do it in their own time. And probably at this current moment when everyone's working at home might be a good way for you IT directors or people in charge of training staff to get training out there to staff without you physically having to be there. So you can find this at our Teacher Centre, and it's all linked under the resources, certifications and training headings. Okay, so I'm going to run through how to get up with G Suite for Education. There is a really quick guide, a quick link to a quick guide on how to get set up and running. And this is really for schools that haven't really even touched on any kind of cloud platform yet and are really brand new to G Suite. This is a really great tool for IT admins who are supporting schools in that situation. So if you are a managed service provider, or you're an IT admin, or schools have just asked you how they can get started, send them over to this quick link here, and it will give them a really nice straightforward guide on how they can get started. I've just pulled out a couple of the key points for today's webinar, but again, please feel free to ask questions as I go through this. So for those of you that don't know what Google for Education is, it's probably a good starting point to start there. So Google for Education basically is categorized into these 3 different areas. G Suite for Education, which is what we're really going to be focusing on today, encompasses all of the productivity tools like Google Docs and Google Slides, and is all built kind of around Google Drive. And with that, we have Google Classroom, which Andy is going to show you a little bit later on. But most of you on the call probably know what Google Classroom is. And at this current time, where we're finding people are using Google Classroom for distance learning, we're seeing it used in really innovative ways, and hopefully that Leo and AET will be able to share that a little bit later. We obviously also have Chromebooks as well, and AET and Leo will talk to you about how they've encompassed that into their distance learning strategy right now. But we're not going to dive too much into that today. But if you have any questions, please let us know. So, step 1. Imagine someone said to you, we want to use Google Classroom. What do you do? If you're an IT admin in your school, or you are the IT coordinator, for example, you can actually go and sign up for G Suite for Education right now. It's free to do. It's GDPR compliant. And I'm going to run you through a couple of quick steps and top tips for really getting it done as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So step 1 is to create an account. If you head over to sign up to G Suite for Education, you'll be taken to a help page, a support page that will give you guidance on how to do it. But basically, it will take you to this screen, and you'll be asked to choose a primary domain. Now, this domain is one that you need to have access to the DNS records. So if you're really going to struggle because maybe your website domains have been set up, years ago and someone else has managed that and they've left, maybe think about creating a new primary domain and buying that domain, and then you can use that to sign up for your account. It's really important that you do have access to this. So again, work with your IT admins if you're struggling to find that information. The second step, and I would argue probably one of the most important steps, is to verify your domain. Now, without going into the nitty-gritty of the approvals process in the Google for Education side of things, we need you to prove that you own that domain before we can go any further with your application. So basically, when you sign up, you'll actually get access to a free trial. It will only give you 10 users, and you won't be moved out of that free trial until you've done this step. So please make sure that you've done this. There are guides, and the link that I shared to start with will tell you how to do that. And consider, depending on who your domain host is, so kind of really common ones are ones like GoDaddy, for example, there are ways that you can do that. And anyone can do it, and the steps are there, but you just need to be able to have access to that domain. The third step is choosing an organisation structure. So there are two ways you could do this. If you're a primary school or a secondary school, just kind of uniquely setting this up, the best one probably for you is the role-orientated structure. So this basically, you'll set up your students, your teachers, etc., and then you maybe will break your students out by year group. And that's probably the most common one. If you're an organisation like a multi-academy trust or a local authority and you're setting this up on behalf of schools, then you're probably more likely going to look at an organisation-oriented structure. And this is where it sounds like it's starting to get technical. It really isn't. It is really straightforward to do. Anyone can set this up. But the point on this is, go back to the guide, refer back to it for best practices. Getting this right to start with will save you a lot of problems in the future. So it's really good to think about this as step 3 after you have your upgraded and approved G Suite for Education domain. Step 4 is creating your user accounts. And again, there are a number of ways to do this. To really just quickly get started and get up and going, the probably easiest way to do it is to upload your users through a CSV file or a spreadsheet. This will allow you to kind of do it once, and all of your users will be in your admin console ready for you to start doing stuff with. In addition to that, there is a bit more of a technical version of this where you can sync your directory, for example, from things like Microsoft Active Directory. You can sync that in automatically. You just need a little bit more of technical know-how to do that. And the option that we're seeing a lot of schools go for, particularly at this time, is working with some of our partners who have these tools ready built. So we have WizKids, One, Salamander, who all do the syncing process for schools automatically in the background. And basically it creates an automatic sync, so it saves anyone having to do that legwork, and it keeps up to date as well. Just as a kind of quick tip, please make sure that you are creating accounts for every single user. We have schools, and Leo Academy Trust will talk to this, that have students from year 1 using and logging into accounts. You don't need to make the passwords incredibly difficult for them to log in. But it's really important to get the best out of these tools that they have their own user accounts. So it's just a top tip for anyone looking to do this. And I've consolidated the last 4 to 7 steps just to make this really quick and simple, and so that we can get on to the good stuff with Andy and the trust waiting on the call. So step 4, set password requirements. So it does require you to have a strong password, but as I said, make sure that once you've set them up, you've set a username and password for every single user. Obviously, in the current climate, you're going to have to get these username and passwords out to people, and usually you would maybe do that in person, but there are ways for you to link up their email addresses so that their details can be sent out to them so they have access wherever they are. Second is to enable and set up services. So you might think moving to a cloud platform is a really difficult task, particularly when you haven't got teachers physically in a school and there to support. You can actually turn off services that aren't going to be relevant to use right now, and will give you time to get up and started really quickly. So our recommendation, and in the guide that I've shared, turning on Classroom Drive and Hangouts Meet are probably the 3 ones you want to start with, and turn off Gmail and Calendar, because right at this moment in time is probably not the best time to move email clients for the one that you already have. So think about that when you're doing that. The third thing on here is customize your user settings. So things like turning off external sharing for students might be one that you can that you really want to make sure is turned off before you allow your users to get going. Again, all of the recommended user settings are within this quick guide. So it means you haven't got to kind of go through all of the hundreds of settings that are in the admin console and decide what's right and wrong for you in your setting. And you'll also need to establish some super admins. So these are people that will have access to your admin console and will basically be managing these settings in the background. It's really important that you have a couple of people in your domain with admin settings, just in case someone can't access the admin console at a particular time. And with that, this is the link again. We will share this out. But one thing just to know is that Google for Education, G Suite for Education is accessible on any device from anywhere at any time. We're seeing a lot of use cases where students are using parents' phones to access their work and continue learning. And even administering settings in your admin console can be done from anywhere. You don't need to be on the school site to do so. So those of you working at home right now, you could spin up a G Suite for Education account really quickly and get set up wherever you are. So with that, I'm going to pass on to Andy, who is going to talk to you about the tools and show you some best practices on how you might use them for distance learning.
Thank you, Kiri. And welcome, everyone. My name's Andy. I'm a Google certified trainer and innovator, and I work here in the UK, but I was previously a teacher. I was a geography teacher and taught in my school for 15 years before moving to the role I do now. So I'm going to just take you through some of the products. We're going to have a look at Classroom. We're going to have a look at Meet, and then we're going to have a quick look at Sites as well, which are 3 really popular products for distance learning. So my screen's coming in, and then we're going to show you what it looks like to go into Google Classroom. So here I am just on the homepage of Google. And then from the homepage of Google, I can go to the picker. And then from the picker, I can choose the Google product and tool I want to go to. In this picker area, pressing the waffle shape and going to picker, you can move these around. So if you frequently use Drive, or if I frequently use Classroom, I can drag and drop these to be in the right place. So if Classroom's right down the bottom and you're going to use it a lot, bring it up the top. So let's go to Google Classroom. Google Classroom really is just a communication platform for teachers to communicate with their students about what's going on in their lesson. And it really becomes the central heart of what's going on with distance learning. I'm seeing lots and lots of tools available now and videos coming for students to help them with distance learning. But Classroom enables you to put all that information in one place. So let's have a look at how we get started. This is, at the moment, I've got no classes here. Some schools will set up classrooms for teachers, but in this case, no classes at the moment. So I press the plus button and I have the choice to create a class. I press create class and it simply asks me, what do I want to call this classroom? So as a geography teacher, I'm going to make a geography class for year 7. Now, these other options here, section, subject, and room, these are all optional. So we can include these if we want to. I can put the subject in there again if I want. I can put the room I normally teach in there if I want. But those are optional choices for me. And then you press create, and Google goes away and creates this class space for communication between you and your students. So we just wait a moment while Google does that. In terms of Google Classroom then, at the moment we have a classroom and I'm obviously on it as the teacher, and then I have the option to bring the students in. Hurry up, Google. Here we go. Okay, so we now have a classroom all set up and we can see that it's called Geography Year 7 and we always open up on the stream page. So this is the stream page in Google Classroom at the top here. We can see stream and on this I can post a message to my class, so I can say hello class and post that on. And Google Classroom works very similar to a sort of social media network in that the most recent posts occur at the top of the class and it just moves back in time as we move down that feed. Now on the stream page, it's up to you to decide who can post on this page. Over in the settings area here, up the settings cog, we can go down to general and we can choose who can post and comment on the classwork page. In terms of distance learning, my recommendation to teachers right now is to leave this so students can post and comment. You can still moderate that page. You can remove comments. And if individual students are leaving inappropriate comments or they leave the answers to your questions and your quizzes, you could mute a student off individually. But my advice through distance learning when students are working remotely is to give them the option on this page to ask questions, ask for clarification. Just use that as a communication space. As we would across any sort of social network type tool. But the only people who can see this page are the students in your class. So this is the stream page. As a teacher, I have access to other pages, so I'm going to move over to the classwork page. On the classwork page, this is where I can create specific things for my students to do. So I'm going to take you through creating an assignment, which is probably the most common thing that teachers do initially. So when I come to create assignment, I can just pop the title in of this assignment. So let's imagine this is write a story. I'm going to ask my students to write me a story. The only thing I have to do on an assignment is put a title. Everything else is optional. So I can put some further instructions in here. I could put about what the story needs to be about or how long I want it to be, 400 words, and so on. Put some further instructions for my students in there. And where Google Classroom gets quite powerful is when we start to add resources in. So down here, we can add resources to our assignment. We can add something from the internet on YouTube, a file, a link to a website, if there's a really good website about creating stories. But most importantly, I can just add something in my Google Drive. So I can just go over to my Google Drive. I can just grab, in this case, I'll grab these slides for now and add them into my classroom. As soon as I add them in, it's automatically set that students can view the file. So if that was another story, an example story for my class, that would be great. It would be on students can view file and they could just read it. What's far more powerful is this bottom choice, make a copy for each student. As a teacher, that's the same as going off to the photocopier, photocopying this for each student in your class and giving them their own individual copy. So when students come into Google Classroom, they'll click on the write a story assignment, and then they'll click on that and they'll be working on their own version. So they're all working. I will be able to access what's going on and drop into different students' work. So that's just creating an assignment. Once I'm happy with that, I can go over here and press assign. You'll notice there's lots of other options on this page around the points, the due date, and whether I want to run things like originality reports. There's a lot more information on these features in our Google for Education Teacher Centre. So if you want to dig into the different options available with assignments, have a look at a course called the First Day of Classroom in the Google for Education Teacher Centre that will take you into that in more detail. But when I press assign, my piece of work goes from obviously my assignment page. It's set to my students. It goes and notifies the students in my class there's been an assignment, so they'll get an email. If they've got the mobile phone app installed, they'll get a little message pop up on the mobile phone app, and it will sign out to the students. So that will go out to the class feed. So that's creating an assignment. Just mentioning a couple of other things you can do on this page. One that's really popular right now is creating a question. We can quickly ask a question of our class, such as, how do you feel today? Because one of the things we're thinking about with distance learning is, okay, are our students doing the work, which would come through assignments, but also are they there? Are they happy? What's their well-being like? And we can do that through Google Classroom. Create a quick multiple choice question, give them maybe some scores, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ask them to where 5 is amazing. Ask them to give us a quick score of how they're feeling today. Make sure on this sort of question, we don't want students in the summary, so turn that off. And again, we can ask that into Google Classroom so that our students have got a question then that we want them to answer. And over on the stream page, we can see in Google Classroom, that stream is there, and there's the question I've asked. So my students can come in, they can answer that question, and I can get a quick sort of feeling for who's in my classroom, who's responding, who's scoring high and who's scoring low, who I might need to follow up with. And Google Classroom can be great question feed for doing that. So that's just a quick look there at some of the tools in Google Classroom. In terms of getting your students on, we have the people area in Google Classroom, and this is where we can add students. So I can add multiple teachers, maybe your head of department or head of faculty wants to come on a classroom, so you can add them in there. And we can also add the students. So lots of different ways of inviting students. We can send them a code. So this code here would enable them to go to Google Classroom and join a class. Or if we have their email addresses, only one off, we could put them in here. So if you're not going to be face-to-face with students, you could put the email addresses in. You only need to attach your student once from to the classroom, and then they are attached forevermore. So it's a one-off process of getting them in, and then that creates the classroom. So that's just a quick overview, just a very basic level of what Google Classroom looks like. I wanted to show you a couple more tools. So the next one I'm going to go over to is Google Meet. So I'm going up to the waffle area again, to the picker area, and going to Google Meet. This is Google Meet, and Google Meet is our video conferencing tool. So we use Google Meet to make video calls. And as you can see, it instantly comes up with start or join a meeting. So I'm going to start a meeting. And as soon as it comes up, it asks me to come up with a name for my meeting. So let's imagine I'm going to have a video lesson and I'm going to deliver a geography lesson. Geography, year 7, pop that in. And then press continue. So I've given this meeting, this meeting a nickname, which other people can find in the domain. But it also means it's my meeting. It means I'm the owner of this meeting and I control the meeting. This then brings me into Meet and allows me then to join the Meet. So we're going to be looking at now Meet while on a video call, but it allows me to join the Meet to create this video call. And at the moment, I'd be in the call on my own. Now, recently, Google gave all schools access to some premium features for Google Meet. So that means now we can have up to 250 people in a Google Meet if you want. So you could do a bigger year group through this tool. Secondly, the ability to record. So if you're not confident necessarily with going live with students, I could come into Meet on my own, press record and do a live recording. And then thirdly, the ability to stream. And the stream is a bit like what you are watching now on YouTube, where my users can just simply watch the stream of what's going on. So those premium features have come to all users of Google for Education. But here I am, I'm in my Meet. I've got a link here now, it says copy joining info. And that's the link that I would want to get to go back to Google Classroom and just say to my class in the stream here, join me for our live lesson. And then I could just add the link in there. And now, once I have that link in there, I just grab the link bit, I grab the text as well, so I'll put that in there. Oops. They've got the link and they could then come to the lesson and join the lesson. And so they could take part in real time and have that communication. The other thing we're seeing some teachers do is they're using the Google Meet tool, but rather than using Google Meet for, let's say, a delivery of a lesson, they're saying to students, okay, here's a Google Meet link. Come along and join me if you've got any questions. So maybe you've set some project work to a class and the students are going off getting on with that work, but some students might be struggling with that work, trying to work remotely. Offer them the Meet link. Say, okay, if any of you got any questions, I'll be on from 10 till 11 tomorrow morning. And students can come in and join the Meet and can ask questions that way. So using Google Meet as an office hours tool is really popular during distance learning. Just going to close my Meet down. Final bit I just want using that as a tool. An alternative to use is Google Sites. If you don't want to use Classroom, some particularly younger students, Classroom's quite text-based. You might find a Sites is a better approach. And Google Sites also works well with parents because we can build a Google site that's publicly viewable to everybody. So I'm going to open just a new browser tab. I'm just going to type in sites.new. A little shortcut here in Google, anything .new, the name of a Google product .new always makes a blank one. So sites.new, because I'm already signed into Google, builds me just a blank website for me to start creating my website on. So sites.new in the browser address bar, and I'm on a blank website. Let's imagine this is my year 2 classroom. So I can just give it a title, year 2, and then I can start to add content very quickly to that website from this area on the right-hand side. So I can bring in things like text, images. I can embed things. If I've got some Google Docs I want to bring across, I can bring those across. And in a short amount of time, Leo Academy are going to talk about, and what you'll see from their work is what they've built, particularly for their younger students, is a Google site. So I can bring any sort of content I like over, maybe a YouTube video if I want to go and insert maybe Joe Wicks's PE lesson for my students to do. I can find that, hopefully, on there. So there's his PE lesson, press select, and it inserts that video across into my Google site. So it's really easy to get content into my site nice and quickly. Make that look nice and big so it fits my site nicely. As soon as I'm happy with the content on my site, I simply need to press publish, decide what little address I want this to be at, press publish, and my website is published for the whole world to see. So I can easily make changes each day or each week, update the content for my students. So what I've got is a website available for them to view and use to access distant learning resources. So I would say in this current climate, Think about the use of Google Classroom as that teacher communication piece. Think about Google Meet if you want to do live lessons and keep that face-to-face contact with students. And finally, Google Sites, which can go wider to parents and younger students. And those are a really quick tour there of 3 quick tools that you could be using with students. I know Kiri's coming back on now.
Thanks, Andy. And just before you go, I just have a couple of questions.
Yeah, sure.
In the chat, we had some really good questions coming in from teachers watching. And so one of the key ones was someone mentioned that you're unable to grade with kind of letters, right? So if you're ABC, could you just quickly show how to do that through rubrics?
Yeah, well, you could actually create a grade scheme. So you can create any sort of grade scheme in Google Classroom in the settings area. So here comes my screen again. So back in Google Classroom, over in settings here, and then down in marking, we can add our own mark categories in here. So scroll down a bit more. So we can start to create, if we want to use yes, no, 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, we can create categories in there and give them values, but ultimately you can have past merit distinctions, quite common for people running with BTEC type courses. So we can create mark categories in that area in Google Classroom to be then picked up with the assignments. So that's one of the ways of doing that. And the other way, Kiri, you just mentioned, is on an individual assignment. I'll just discard that change. On an individual assignment, when I'm in, discard that as well. When I'm in creating an assignment, we also have the option now to add rubrics in. So if I'm creating an assignment over here on the right-hand side, I can add rubrics to my work. And rubrics is quite an American term. We more often call them sort of level descriptors here in the UK. So it allows me to say to my students, if I'm doing that write a story piece, okay, so these are the sort of things I might see in a level 1 story, and this one might see in a level 2 story and a level 3 story. And then if I create the rubric in Google Classroom, when I go back in, I can then select which areas and which criteria the student's covered to allow the student to see within that rubric what they've achieved. So you could have a whole range of ways of assessing there in terms of marking work in Classroom. Hope that helped.
Thank you. Second question, is it literally available for the whole world to see, or is it only accessible to students in your classroom?
In terms of Google Classroom is only available for students in your classroom to view. So you have to give them the class code or put them in by email to be able to access. And therefore that Google Classroom is closed to you and your class, and you control who can see that.
Obviously, sorry. Oh, okay. And even in your Google Drive, unless you physically give access to someone else, and as I said, you can actually turn external sharing off. It's still yours, and you own that document, and it's yours to keep and do whatever you want with until you then go and share. But you, as the creator of a particular document or presentation, decide on who gets to see it. Oh, sorry, Google Sites, I think we were referring to.
Oh, so in terms of Google Sites, and answering that question for who can see it, you can choose the permission levels that you want. So it's the same as any other tool within Google. So if you want a Google site that is just for your students, you could just share that internally so that only students from your domain could see it. They'd have to be signed into their school account to be able to view that site. So that could be an option if you want to keep your resources closed. And then other people have chosen that wider sharing. If you're working with younger students, my recommendation right now with distance learning would probably to make the site quite open, because then parents could come in and see what is it their children are supposed to be doing. Because let's be honest, parents are going to be involved in that. So I'd say probably with younger students, probably keep your site quite open. Obviously, once you get students in year 3, 4, 5, they can easily cope with going and signing in. You can keep your passwords nice and simple. So then you could then lock the site away again. So it's thinking about that balance of access versus, security on what you're going to put on the site.
And I've got 2 more questions that I'm going to answer really quickly. So one of them was, actually, we've had a few of these. Some of you don't know where to get the record feature of Meet. It might need to be activated in your admin console. So whoever at the minute is managing your IT admin or your managed service provider who manages your admin console, please get in touch with them and ask them to activate it, and then you'll see it appear within Google Meet. And the other one is about what happens if you're not using Google Drive, for example? So you can upload documents to Google Classroom. It doesn't matter where you get it from. But in terms of the best way to get the best use out of collaboration, etc., you're probably best to upload into into Google Drive and then attach your documents from there. And it's really quick and easy to do. If you have a ton of documents in your kind of My Files on your computer, you can literally upload all, and there's a setting within Google Drive that allows you to select it, and it will automatically convert into the right format. So if it's a Word document, it'll go into a Google Doc. If it's a PowerPoint, it'll go into Google Slides. So it's really quick and easy to do. Okay, I think we're going to finish with questions there. Thank you so much, Andy. Andy will keep in the chat and answer questions through writing rather than verbal.
Yeah. So I'll pick up in the YouTube chat if anyone's got any questions.
Thanks, Andy. Okay, moving on then. So next, we're really lucky. We have two people joining us from Leo Academy Trust, Graham Macaulay and Cheryl Shirley. Guys, I'll leave you to introduce yourselves and what your job role is, and then we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Thanks, Kiri, and thanks for introducing us. So my name is Graham Macaulay, and I'm the Director of Technology for Learning at the Leo Academy Trust.
And I'm Cheryl Shirley, and I'm the Year 4 leader at Leo Academy Trust.
Super. And I'm just going to talk you through very quickly some of our strategy and some of our thinking about the use of technology. But really what I want to be able to do is give Cheryl a good chunk of time to be able to show you some practical examples of how we as an organisation have responded to the challenges of distance learning. So we'll just advance on to the next slide where we'll go through the organisation that we are. So we're 6 academies spread across 7 sites. I think what's really important here is to point out that we're a primary only map. So some of the challenges that I've seen in the chat have been centred around logging in and whether distance learning really works for primary and whether it's possible. And hopefully what we'll be able to do is to share some examples of how we've done that. Just to clarify, really, we're really lucky in the sense that over the last 2 or 3 years, we've worked really hard to form a digital strategy across the trust that encompasses all of our schools. And so obviously we'll share with you some of the bits we've done. But I think just to reassure you that we've been on this journey for a long time. This hasn't happened sort of overnight. Just go to the next slide, Cheryl. Super. So I'm actually going to slightly move away from Google and just to think about wider implications and wider things to be thinking about before you look into how you're going to provide distance learning. And I think probably my number one message for you is be really careful of making knee-jerk strategic decisions based on distance learning. We spent an awful long time building up, working with sort of stakeholders and thinking about how we were going to do that. And whilst I realised there was a lot of pressure on schools very quickly to get a system in place, I still think that I would prioritise spending time thinking about your strategy. What is your strategy to provide distance learning in the short term, but also how can this continue long term as when we return to schools and some sense of normality returns. As well as that, I think it's really important that we really look at ourselves and really think about what your school structure and your organisation structure is. And I don't mean just the number of Chromebooks or iPads or tablets that you've got, but what is your staff skill set? What is their approach to this? Is the climate right to be starting to deliver some cloud transformation work, or is actually the solution a simple Google site like we've done that will actually provide a fantastic opportunity for children? And I think when we talk about our distance learning provision, of course, it's about children, it's providing them with an education, but it's also understanding the wider community. And it's recognising that parents are key players in this, and we need to be engaging with them to recognise what they want and what they kind of need support from schools, but also to recognise that schools have an impact far wider than the 4 walls of the building, and to look at what are the local issues in the community that you're having that perhaps schools can support with. Kiri touched on staff training and CPD. We know, as do lots of organisations, that change management is really hard. Getting people on board with things that perhaps in their eyes work fine is a real challenge. And so I think it's really important schools look at that from the outset. How are we going to get staff on board? It's great that we've got over 500 people on this call, and that's absolutely perfect. But also, what about all the people that haven't engaged with this call? How do we get them on board? Kiri also mentioned about accredited training. We've used distance learning as a fantastic opportunity to offer level 1, level 2, and now some trainer training for some of our staff. due to the in some ways the kind of almost time that we might have when we wouldn't have when we have classes in front of us. So there are lots of exciting opportunities that we've benefited from as a result of school closures. And of course, I guess the most important one to say is that, you know, don't forget basics, don't forget our safeguarding requirements of keeping children safe in education for schools in the UK. And I know LGFL have done some fantastic resources in the public domain on safeguarding that I'll put into the chat later if someone doesn't beat me to it. But, you know, think about, are we protecting children? Are we exposing them to greater risk, and how are we managing that? And of course, the GDPR implications of software. Yes, there are lots of edtech. Yes, there are lots of bits of software being provided for free, but ultimately there's sometimes or perhaps a hidden cost. But I guess more important than any of that is just to give you an opportunity to see what we've done and to get some ideas that hopefully you can take away and use for your own. So I'm going to pass over to Cheryl, who will give you a bit of a talk through our distance learning platform. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Graham. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you our distance learning platform. You can find it on www.leodistancelearning.co.uk, and it looks something like this. So as you can see, what we've done is we've used a Google site, and we've got 6 schools in our trust. So this is accessible for every single parent in our trust. Made it really simple. We've just put on the pictures of the school badges, and then they literally can click to access their school's distance learning. If you scroll down, we've also put in a live chat service, which we're running between 8 and 4 every day. You literally just click that link and you can speak to one of the team. And then what I want to do is just show you mainly the part where we go into the sites themselves. So we're just going to click into My Schools. So this is kind of the home page. You'll see it's pretty much the same as what the Leo site is at the moment. But what we've done is we've created pages for every single year group, quite easy to access. We found that even our children can do this. So we're clicking into year 3. So what we've tried to do is we've set up so that every day from the central team, there is a live maths and English lesson for every pupil that they can access. Now, because our schools are all sort of quite far away and everybody's sort of learning different things, we've tried to make them really generic because we just found that we wanted them to still be accessing curriculum content, but not necessarily directly related to what they're learning in class. So if we click here, I'll just show you. They can click any of the year group, really, really simple. And then what we've done is we've got a lesson that's taught by one of our members of staff, and then they can click into the resources and access anything that they want for the lesson. So there's all the things that they can do. And then other things that we've kind of been posting assemblies and things on, so we're really not losing that contact with children at all. They're still seeing our faces every day, which is really good. The other thing, so every school, every teacher has been asked to kind of put up their kind of reading. Now at our school, we've got 2 year groups that use Google Classroom at the moment, and we've got 2 year groups that don't. So that was quite a challenge in itself, trying to make sure that this site worked for all children. But again, for this one, we've just literally put hyperlinks which lead to our Google Drives, and then they can just access anything from the outside. Just make sure that we set everything to sort of public only, so everybody can click through, again, from any device. I don't think there's anything else I can mention, really. I think that's it. Graham, is there anything that you wanted to add?
No, I guess just the key message here is to say that actually it's about keeping it simple. We've empowered almost 500 staff from across the organisation to be able to edit these websites. And actually, the success for us of this website has been about actually keeping it simple so that all of our members of staff can update it and kind of keep it fresh, really.
Great, thank you both. Really insightful. I absolutely love your Google site. I think it's one of the best things I've seen so far in terms of particularly getting out to primary school children and, you know, getting their interaction. I think I'd just like to take a moment really and think about parents, right? We're expecting them to know how to log into G Suite and go to Classroom and access work. And actually having something like a Google site where everything is is there, and all the links are kind of ready to go. It just really helps us with parent engagement and keeping our parents up to scratch with what's going on. So really, really like that. I'm just going to have a look now to see if there are any specific questions. I don't think we have anything specifically for Leo. A lot of them have been product questions. So I think we'll go in and carry on adding to that. But Leo will be back at the end if you do have any questions to ask. Thanks, everyone. Okay, moving on. So now we have a different perspective. So Leo Academy Trust being a primary trust. And now we're going to move on to Academy's Enterprise Trust. And with us today, we have Francis Soul and Darren White, who are going to talk to you about what AET are doing. So over to you guys.
Hi, I'm Francis Soul. I'm Director of Education for AET, an educational trust. And with me, I have
myself, Darren White. Hi there. I'm Learning Technologies and Communication Marketing Lead at New Rickstones Academy and Maltings Academy, both in Witham in Essex, and part of the AET.
So just a little bit about AET and where we are on our journey with Google and learning technology. So we're 58 schools, 21 secondary, 2 of which Darren is looking after from a technology point of view. We cover 32,000 students, 5,000 plus staff, and a unique group, 60 plus innovators. And these are our team across all our academies that really, really support our learning technology, have done their Google training, and now are leading the sort of the development of this. We had plans in place across our academies to develop sort of areas of classroom and Google and really push forward, but our plan was extending over a year. With the current crisis in the last 2 weeks, we've accelerated everything. And the reason for this, it's not just about the numbers, it's about the children. With 32,000 children who won't be getting a full education or wouldn't have been for the next few however months, we really, really needed to invest to get the best for the children across our academies. So far in the last 2 weeks, it's been a real team effort. 15,000 Google Classrooms have been set up. 10,000 documents created already in those classrooms. We've issued an additional 5,000 Chromebooks so children can all get that online access at home if they haven't already got it. And the thing to be really remember with AET is that we have a really sort of big percentage of disadvantaged children that wouldn't have access to that technology otherwise and to that learning. So we want to keep them really engaged and really learning throughout this period of time and have a successful experience. And in order to do that, we've got to have our staff trained. So the first thing we did was kick off staff training, and we're training on average, and Darren is one of those people leading that with other people in the organisation, and we're having up to 1,000 of our teachers watching our live stream every day with every aspect of the sort of Google G Suite that they're going to use in their classrooms. And then alongside that, a parallel, we've got our expert teachers that are running a 15-day program initially to live stream really sort of good teaching and learning while our other teachers get up to speed and really engage at classroom level with their students and keep them on track with their learning as they go. But really what you want to hear from is Darren, who's down there in the classroom, in our 2 of our academies, really bringing this to life and making it happen. So over to you, Darren.
Thanks, Francis. I think from a school's perspective, I'd just like to echo what Francis has said about the support coming in from the trust. There's huge teams doing an awful lot of work. Ian Taylor and his curriculum team working on these lessons for us so that we can provide those to year 5 and year 6 and to years 10 and 11. But also then the team of innovators and everybody working behind the scenes to get this project up and running, as Francis said, in a matter of a week, really. So I just wanted to talk from the point of view of working on the ground in the academies. As I said, I work in 2 secondary academies in Witham in Essex, Maltings Academy and New Rickstones Academy. And we're delivering our distance learning principally via Google Classroom, but not just delivering the learning, also provided the day-to-day feedback. And as we've all said already, that contact with individuals, with young people at the moment is really important to them. They're used to, you know, in a secondary school setting, seeing 1,000 or more people every single day of their lives. And at the moment, they might be seeing 1 or 2 if they're lucky. So that kind of face-to-face and one-to-one channel of communication is really important. And Google Classroom allows us to do that. So we're able to speak directly with the students, answer their questions, and get a real dialogue going. And as Andy gave in the example, just being able to use that opening question of how are you feeling today actually might be the first time that somebody says that to them, depending on their own circumstances. So we've been using a variety of approaches through Google Classroom. Many of our staff are used to Google Classroom, but some not so much. And as we say, we've been using our daily training opportunities to train as many staff as possible. But more and more, we've been using things like Google Meet to record messages to students to start the day and putting those into Google Classroom, but also instructions as well, because if you think back to the days of everything being on paper, we would have sent home a pack of work and there would have been no opportunity for discussion, no chance for the students to ask exactly what they need to do, and very hard for them to let us know if they were struggling. And now we can go straight into that. The students can leave the comments in the classroom, and then we can record a video if we need to, just a short 1 or 2 minutes to give them that explanation and allow them to move on. We can also record our screen so we can demonstrate the thinking behind it. We can give them concrete examples. We're also using live sessions as well and recording those for smaller groups where we've got students who need that little bit of extra support. And then on top of that, we're also using Google Classroom and Google Meet for virtual meetings. So we're being able to meet with all of the staff. We've been able to hold assemblies. We've been able to have SLT meetings, and the senior leadership team have been able to quality assure what's going on as well, because they've got access to those Google Classrooms and they can see the work being set and they can see the dialogue going backwards and forwards between the students, which is really quite entertaining at times. You know, children are fantastic, and you get some really lovely messages, which when you're sat at home on your own is quite comforting. We've also been doing a daily Google staff room through Meet, so virtual staff room. So every day we've been inviting all of the staff to just come together on Meet and just get together, see a friendly face and have a bit of a chat and laugh, and an opportunity to talk about any issues we're having, but also to just kind of have a little bit of new normality again. And then as a staff, we've also across both academies been making welfare calls to all of our students and families, and obviously trying to get in touch with everybody at least once a week. And then we've been keeping a record of that using Google Forms, and equally within that, if there are any particular safeguarding concerns that are raised, we're then using an add-on called Formule, which is alerting our designated safeguarding lead if there's anything he needs to be aware of. So all of these tools are really fantastic. And the fact that we're not all in the school building doesn't stop us from being a school. A school is the people that's in it. And that's the most important bit. So I just thought I'd add to the slide there, and no doubt you will have read them already, some of the feedback we've had from parents since this all kind of started a few weeks ago, really appreciating all of the work that's gone in, because as we've said previously, it's a stressful time for the parents as well. And the ability to be able to visually explain and face-to-face explain things and have some interaction with the students, I think is very much appreciated. And everything is stored within the classroom for us, so it's almost like having a virtual filing cabinet for every single student, which is really good fun.
Great, thank you so much, Darren and Francis. Hopefully that was a really good overview to how different primary and secondary organisations are supporting their students. What I'd like to do now is to bring back all of the presenters, because we have some really great questions that have come up in the feed, and I just want to make sure that we try and get through as many as possible before our time is up in about 6 minutes. So the first one, whilst everyone is back, is obviously with and you know, part of the reason we're on the call today is to really talk about how to continue learning when children aren't in school, and using online tools is a great way to do that. But what about students that don't have access to devices and or internet at home? What are you guys doing to support that? I'll start with Francis on that one, and then we'll move over to Leo after that.
So as I said when I was speaking, we've got a fair proportion of disadvantaged children, over 30%, and we acknowledge they don't have equipment at home or even don't have data. So we actually initially stripped out the Chromebooks that were in the trolleys with the chargers and sent the children home with them, as many as we could. We've issued Wi-Fi dongles to them. We've sourced more Chromebooks, more are being dispatched as we speak, to make sure that every child that needs it and is a priority to us in terms of free school meals of disadvantage are at the head of the queue.
Thanks, Francis. And over to Graham on this one as well, please.
So my answer is actually very similar to Francis, is that we decided quite quickly that we needed to put a solution in place for this. So we did a very quick Google form to all the parents from across the trust to find out how many children don't have access to the internet. And we did exactly that. We stripped out Chromebooks from trolleys and all that sort of thing. We procured some very quickly from XMA, who are one of the companies that we procure Chromebooks from. And also we did the same survey for internet access, procured some dongles, sent them home so that all of our children had the same sort of equality of opportunities.
Thanks, Graham. So some really good practical tips there of how people can actually get devices potentially, and we're aware that not a lot of schools can do that. There is a product, if you're a London school, you may have already heard about this, but Cloud Ready by a company called Neverware can actually convert old devices into essentially Chromebooks. And so that might be a good option for if potentially family have got old kit lying at home, uncles, aunts, grandparents that could give a device to that student. You could flash that with Cloud Ready operating system, and basically the children could get up and going. So that might be a way to kind of increase the amount of devices that are at home as well, for particularly schools that maybe don't have budget to go out and procure brand new Chromebooks. A couple of other questions coming in, and one that I wanted to just talk to Leo, ask Leo about is, do you think that using Google Classroom is appropriate for both Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, and how have you managed that?
So that's a good question. That's a question that I get asked fairly often about age appropriacy. Our story is slightly different to lots of schools in the sense we started with a Key Stage 2 one-to-one Chromebook program where we started in year 4. So all of our year 4 children have access to their own Chromebook funded by the trust. As a result of that, we've opened that up to wider into Key Stage 2 at the moment. And we're just at the phase where we're starting to trial the use of Google Classroom in Key Stage 1. I 100% believe that it's definitely possible, and it's definitely a useful kind of learning experience. I think, as with all of these sort of EdTech implementations, it's about the training, the support, the wider strategic support about what does your marking policy say, what does your teaching and learning policy say. But I would 100% agree that Google Classroom is a really effective tool in Key Stage 1 as well as Key Stage 2.
Great. And I just have a question actually that I'm going to pass over to Darren and Cheryl as real teachers, right, on the ground at the moment. If you could give advice to any teacher who's currently working from home and maybe either is in a situation where they're not set up so well from an organisation level when it comes to using technology, what would your advice be to, Darren, we'll start with you, to a secondary teacher who may be on the call today?
It broke up a little bit at the beginning there, Kerry, so I didn't quite catch it. But I think you were asking about what would my advice be to somebody who's not so well set up. Was that it?
Yes, that's correct. Sorry.
Okay. So, I mean, essentially, the way I kind of went about it when I first started was I worked with Dean many years ago, and his attitude was very much, you can't break it, so don't worry too much. So I have my own personal account where I used to try things out on, and I wasn't fussed if it then didn't do what I needed it to do, or it hadn't messed up anything from a school's perspective. So that built a lot of confidence. I would just say, don't be frightened of the technology. There are loads and loads of videos out there, loads and loads of support networks that can give you the answers, Facebook groups, Twitter feeds, YouTube channels, where people are really, really generous. And teachers on the whole are incredibly generous at sharing ways of the work. And there's not one way, there's potentially 9, 10 different ways of achieving things. So it's worth asking the questions, I think, and get the support from those forums. But like I say, don't be afraid and try it. If it doesn't work, you don't have to do it that way again, but you've tried.
Thanks, Darren. Really great advice. And Cheryl, over to you for more of a primary school lens on that question.
Yeah, just to add to what Darren said, really, I mean, like what we've done with the tech has just been incredible. And, you know, we did it over quite a short period of time. And I think there were lots of teachers that were worried about how it was all going to work out. But when we actually started seeing the impact it was having on the children, I think people really sort of got on board with it. And again, like just what Darren said, don't be scared to just give it a go. And, you know, and it's just been so successful. And like we see what the children, how well the children are succeeding. And that's why it's worth doing.
Great. Well, that's really all we have time for today. I feel like a news reporter, which is probably my dream job. So thank you all for those that joined the call today, particularly from Leo Academy Trust and AET, who I'm sure are incredibly busy, and as everyone has a lot of stuff going on. Thank you to everyone that joined the call to listen to the webinar today. As we've made aware and we have linked in the comments, we're going to be doing more next week. There are a lot of questions around, you know, how do we do X in Google Classroom? How do we do this in Google Forms? We will be doing some practical, kind of more hands-on live, the stuff that Andy did today next week with some of the tools. So please make sure you head over and register for those webinars. That's everything from me today. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you again soon.